What do you want to know about Austin? Our AT Explained project takes your questions about Austin's people, places, and things and goes the distance to answer them. Subscribe to the AT Explained podcast. Find it on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app, or go to atexplained.org.
A bill to provide $10 billion in low-interest loans that would benefit the oil and gas industry in the name of beefing up the power grid. A closer look today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. A lot of questions over the push for those loans aimed at preventing statewide blackouts. We'll hear more. Also, almost 1 year after the worst school shooting in Texas history, state lawmakers running out of time in this session to make changes to gun laws. In San Antonio, the silver and black are back as Spurs fans get lit up over the prospect of a #1 draft pick. Also, actor Christina Vidal on a new streaming series about coming of age in the Alamo City. The week in politics and a whole lot more coming up today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 19th day of May 2023. I'm David Brown. Happy Friday, one and all. Do you believe in life after death? Well, in the Texas legislature, it's definitely a thing. Consider two bills proposed by Republican Senator Brian Birdwell of Granbury. Birdwell had proposed a mandatory 10-year prison sentence for human smugglers, and another bill to make it a crime in Texas for anyone to enter the state any place but at a point of legal entry. Both measures had stalled, apparently dead in the water. But yesterday, Granbury's two proposals, criticized for pushing the limits of the state's authority to enforce immigration laws, were back. Added to House Bill 7, a bill that would create a new state border police unit and dedicate $100 million for new detention centers, security, and economic development projects for border towns. Now that bill's on its way to the full Senate for consideration. 9 days left in the session may not sound like much, but you can expect other measures to bounce back to life in the form of amendments as we near the formal end of the session. Another issue lawmakers are still wrangling over is what to do about the state's power grid. One of the bills aimed at punching up its reliability is Senate Bill 2627, a bill that would provide billions of dollars in low-interest loans that would benefit oil and gas companies. Mose Bouchel's been tracking this. He's a senior correspondent covering energy and the environment at KUT. Mose, welcome back.
Thanks, David.
I think I misunderstood exactly what this bill would do. $10 billion in low-interest loans. These wouldn't go directly to oil and gas companies, these loans, but they would ultimately be the benefactor. What does that have to do with the power grid?
Yeah, that's right. They would benefit insofar as this $10 billion in low-interest loans would go towards electric companies, basically, to build new natural gas power plants. This would be low-interest loans and also, I should say, bonuses, so also some free money if they meet certain goals to build natural gas power plants. Obviously, that would be kind of a nice little thing for these power companies. And also, once you build the plants, well, your gas companies are going to benefit because they supply the power plants with the gas.
What about renewables? I know that there's been a lot of excitement about Texas being #1 by many measures when it comes to renewable energy.
Yeah, this has actually kind of come along with a parallel push to curtail renewables. Some of the very same people supporting these bills to build out natural gas infrastructure are trying to throttle renewables in Texas, limit their growth. And this bill in particular does not provide these loans to battery storage, for example. So you could build a big utility scale battery, power that with renewables, but no, that is not eligible for this type of loan under this bill.
There's an interesting bit of sort of behind-the-scenes horse trading, as I understand it, that happened with this Senate Bill 2627. Apparently, the most recent vote wasn't recorded, and this has created some kind of tension. Could you say what exactly happened here?
Yes, and just to reiterate, this is not just naming a highway after somebody. This is a $10 billion proposal to move taxpayer public money to the energy sector. And it's a Senate bill. It was in a House committee, the Committee for State Affairs, and it had to get voted out of that committee in order to reach the full House. The whole process. There are all these deadlines they have to meet.
Right.
What the chairman of this committee did was convened a hearing in an agricultural museum that actually exists in the state capitol. First thing in the morning, called the committee members in and put a replacement for this bill on the table and essentially said, you got to vote on this. And that caused a lot of upset among some some of the committee members. They hadn't even had time to read the bill. And
wait a minute. What about debate? Right? Isn't that part of what the committee hearing process is about?
One would think, right? There was an altercation, is my understanding, when they were told they couldn't even ask questions about this bill. This happened Wednesday morning.
How common is it, especially in the waning hours of a session, to do something like this?
It's not uncommon to have these little kind of sidebar meetings because they're scrambling to get these bills out by certain deadlines. What I think really brought attention to this was the consequence of this particular proposal. This is a bill, a proposal that had been kind of troubled from the start. They've been really trying to kind of push it through the process. There's a lot of opposition, and the fact that this would happen in this museum with no recordings made, I should say, there's no ability to record or broadcast these meetings when they happen in these places. And a lot of people suggest that some of these more controversial proposals and bills happen in these places for a reason. It avoids public scrutiny, and there's no recording made.
And I bet we're going to be seeing and hearing a lot more about these sorts of decisions being made in sort of side chambers there at the Capitol. So, as I understand it, the bill has made it out of the Senate, currently working its way through the House. Do I have that right? Any sense of whether or not Governor Abbott would sign this?
My understanding is that he's interested in this particular bill, and I think I read the word he was intrigued by it. I don't know if that signals full support. If this does make it into law, it would also come up for a statewide vote. So we may face the prospect of Texas voters deciding whether or not to finance new power plants in November.
Would this actually help with the power grid?
That's the real big question, right? Obviously, supporters say it would, and they say, hey, you build new power plants, you got more power. That's kind of a simple explanation for why they like this idea. Opponents say even if it would help, it's a really expensive way of doing it. It's unnecessary. There are other ways we can fix the grid. And it should be stated, even some power companies oppose this. Even people that own and operate power plants don't think this is a good idea. Some of them would argue that all this would do is incentivize new plants to get built, but then old plants getting shut down. So you may not actually get much kind of bang for your buck if what you're trying to do is incentivize new generation.
Mose Buchel covers energy and the environment at our home station KUT, and there's going to be a lot more on this one, I'll bet, Mose. We hope you'll come back and keep us posted.
I'd love to do it. Thank you, David.
It's been almost a year since a gunman entered Robb Elementary School in Uvalde and killed 21 people, injuring many more. It was the deadliest school shooting in Texas history. All this week, we've been bringing you the voices of some of the family members of those killed. They've told us they're still waiting for changes to the state's gun laws they say contributed to the tragedy. Sergio Martinez Beltran of the Texas Newsroom has more.
A year ago, just after the shooting, I went to Uvalde. Honestly, it's been the hardest assignment I've ever had, and one that hasn't really ended. Last May, I talked to victims' family members, to parents preparing to bury their kids. I covered memorials and funerals. I got yelled at by residents. And I don't blame them. I was asking about the worst thing that had ever happened to them. The worst thing that will ever happen to them. But one question stuck in my mind about solutions. What do you think we should do to prevent a mass shooting like this from happening again?
I think they should raise the age limit guns, especially like assault rifles.
I met Juan Castillon outside the Uvalde Hillcrest Cemetery a few days after the shooting.
You know, we shouldn't have like 18-year-olds going and getting like military weapons. I mean, look what they're using them for, you know?
He wasn't the only person who said this. People started pleading with state lawmakers, asking them to raise the minimum age to purchase a semi-automatic rifle to 21. As months went by, those calls only grew.
We don't need your hope. We need your action. Do your damn jobs.
Enough is enough. Raise the damn age.
Since the Texas legislature convened in January, the families of Robb Elementary shooting victims came to the Capitol every week. They met with lawmakers. They held rallies. And earlier this month, something, albeit small, happened. In a surprise vote, the bill they were pushing for, the one that would raise the minimum age to buy assault weapons, was passed in a House committee.
There being 8 ayes, 5 nays, and 0 present not voting, the motion.
The room erupted in cheers. Lawmakers cried. Representative Tracy King, a Democrat whose district includes Uvalde, was the bill's author. He talked to reporters right after that vote.
Oh, we're just ecstatic that we were able to get it this far. I'm so grateful to the groups, every town and all of the groups that worked on this and my staff.
The key word there was this far. The celebration was short-lived. Even though the House committee passed the bill, the measure missed a key deadline. Now it's presumed dead. And none of that surprised Republican lawmakers, like Representative Ryan Guillen. He voted against the bill.
The support is not there in the legislature, and that's what happens with bills that don't have the support in the legislature.
Guillen says he believes there are other solutions to gun violence.
I'm for taking guns away from bad people, not from good ones, and it's finding that balance. That's what we've got to do. We've got to find that balance to where we are taking them from the bad people and not from the good.
But Guillen didn't elaborate on what that would look like. But there are some Texas Republicans who do think raising the age is the right thing to do. They just aren't enough of them. And without the political will, changing the state's laws around guns is basically impossible. That hasn't deterred the Uvalde families from continuing their fight.
They think that they can just keep going and holding out and that we're not going to, they're going to tire us out. We're not tiring out.
That's Brett Cross, who spent the last year advocating for changes. His 10-year-old son, Uzziah, was killed at Robb Elementary School.
We lost our damn children. We have fight.
Cross and those families say part of that fight will be held at the ballot box next year. When asked what people should do next, they say vote out the Republicans against raising the minimum age to buy assault weapons. I'm Sergio Martinez Beltran in Austin.
Shelley Brisbane is in for Wells Dunbar, monitoring the talk of Texas online. Shelley, welcome back.
Thanks, David. Well, as we've been hearing this morning already, the legislature is winding down and considering bills. And I've been seeing this kind of session-ending stories, you see, about how lawmakers can kill bills with procedural tactics if they want to. And I recommend a couple stories over from our friends at the Texas Newsroom on your public radio station site or from the Texas Tribune if you're interested in that kind of civic stuff. But I thought I'd also mention the status of a couple of bills that are working their way through the chambers at this point. This morning, SB 12 is going to be considered in the House. It's a bill that formerly would have banned drag shows and is now more focused on sexual performance. And the Trib folks on Twitter, the Texas Tribune, is saying it's actually a fairly quiet day over at the Capitol, considering the topic of the bill. Another bill, this one has passed both chambers. HB 9 would provide $5 billion in broadband funds to support infrastructure for the internet in Texas. And that could go to the voters if the governor signs that one.
Whole lot of shaking going on at the state capitol, and we would love to hear your thoughts about what's happening. Reach out to us. Why don't you look for Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. Shelley Brisbane in for Wells Dunbar, monitoring the talk of Texas, and Shelley will be back in 35.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas ABLE program, helping eligible Texans with disabilities save and plan for the future to pay for qualified disability expenses with a tax-advantaged ABLE account. Learn more at texasable.org.
The Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast is with you to talk through what you're watching, listening to, and reading. What you need to check out this weekend, what you can skip next, it's all fair game. For pop culture in high spirits, listen to the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Well, the Texas House has tentatively passed the Senate's main property tax reform bill, but with an important change. Andrew Schneider of Houston Public Media reports that change increases the odds the governor will have to call a special session if he wants a property tax cut this year.
The House version of Senate Bill 3 still includes the Senate's focus. It raises the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $70,000 for most homeowners and to $100,000 for seniors. But it also adds a provision from the House's main property tax bill, as Morgan Meyer, chair of the Ways and Means Committee, explained.
SB 3 retains the House's reduction of the appraisal increase cap from 10 to 5% and an expansion of that cap to all real property.
That addition makes the bill a dead letter when it returns to the Senate. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has repeatedly said that lowering the appraisal cap would lead to tax bills going up. He said it's, quote, bad math, and he would not negotiate on it. I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
Support for Coverage of Business comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' comp provider dedicated to helping businesses work safer, stronger, better, providing driver safety videos and resources to help protect workers on the road. More at texasmutual.com/driversafety.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. It's International Bike to Work Day. Austin celebrated the morning commute with dozens of stations set up around the city with free food, drinks, and bicycle accessories. There's also an after-work party aimed at enticing people to get on their bikes and ride. But still, the number of people who do bike to work is quite low indeed. Nathan Bernier of KUT in Austin looked into why.
For some people, biking to work is a way of life.
I used to live in San Marcos. When I first started working in Austin, I was like, I'm going to ride my bike twice a week.
And how long would that take?
An hour and a half each way.
This is Jake Boone.
And then that became a lot. Yeah.
Now he lives in Austin, no more 30-mile bike rides to work. But Boone is now trying to convince others to enjoy the benefits of commuting on a bicycle, even if it's just for a day. He's with the nonprofit Gisalo Cycling Initiative, and he's the guy behind this year's Bike to Work Day in Austin.
We're partnering with 45 local businesses who are going to be running fueling stations all over the city. So we give out the treats to kind of incentivize people to give it a try with the hope that they'll enjoy it and make a routine out of it.
99% of workers in Austin don't use a bike for their commute, according to the Census Bureau. There's a lot of reasons. It gets hot here. The city is spread out. We have a lot of hills. You might need to carry a bunch of stuff with you. Not everyone can ride a bike, and sometimes there's nowhere to lock it up. E-bikes fix some of these problems, but the number one reason people don't ride a bike to work, according to a lot of research and a city survey, is a fear of getting seriously hurt or killed by a car or truck. This is the sound of Grace Matthews' bike. It's not getting as much use these days.
I just kind of got spooked. I saw an ambulance one time with a bike laying out, and somebody had clearly been hit, and I don't know if they were okay or not, and just kind of decided it wasn't worth the risk anymore.
Face first into the pavement, and their rear tire ran over part of my arm. I did have a lot of lingering issues after that. Had to get dental work. It really shook me up.
There is a painted bike lane on South Lamar. I don't feel safe riding in it just because of how fast people drive. I've frequently seen people driving in the bike lane.
People just generally aren't looking for bikers. It's just a concern as to like where you should ride, because if you're in the street, you could get run over from people trying to pass you.
And I think that's one of the annoying things about Austin is there's this image of wanting to be greener and wanting to have these like healthy streets and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, businesses and cars always win out.
That was Matthew Duncan, Kelsey Hughes, Eric Holbeck, and Sway Youngston. Hello, Rodney. Nathan. Rodney Williams understands these concerns. He's a volunteer with the Austin Ghost Bike Project. They're the ones who put those white bikes around town where cyclists have been killed.
This is the workshop.
In your backyard here?
Yeah. I just throw up a board and a tarp and get the white paint and get going.
Inside his house, I wanted to ask Williams, why does he do this? Why does he make ghost bikes?
I mean, I ride a bike a lot. And whenever a crash happens and someone actually dies, it becomes kind of personal. Like there was one case a couple of months ago, a fellow about my age had retired and was actually riding across the United States. And of all places to have been in a hit and run situation was here in Austin.
He's referring to Keith Culver. Culver was 73, and he was killed last year on East Stastney Lane. There's a ghost bike there now, but Austin police have suspended the case. They don't have a suspect.
Which is one of our concerns for the city, APD, to actually take a more aggressive approach to working these cases.
What else would you like to see the city do?
Well, I guess the main point would be to create, at a faster pace, more protected bike lanes.
Protected bike lanes have some kind of physical separation from cars, so it could be anything from little plastic flex posts to a concrete curb to parked vehicles acting as a barrier. So far this year, at least 4 people riding bikes have been killed in crashes with motor vehicles. That's the highest number for this time of year since 2017. The most recent death was on Lamar Boulevard near 12th Street, an area that had been slated to get protected bike lanes. Chris Riley with the nonprofit Safe Streets Austin lives a few blocks from there.
In almost every case, you'll find that it was in a place where the city has been planning protected bike facilities but has not yet built them.
Austin's official bicycle plan calls for building almost 400 miles of protected bike lanes. Right now, the city is more than halfway there with about 240 miles. But the city is only constructing 10 to 15 miles of bike lanes per year. That is comparable to a lot of bike-friendly American cities, and it's pretty high by Texas standards. But it can be hard to build bike lanes because some people don't want them. They take away space from cars. Laura Deerenfield is with Austin's Transportation and Public Works Department.
This really is a pursuit for a safer, more livable community and helping to understand what those trade-offs are. So those conversations can be really challenging because there are true trade-offs to that precious street space.
And there's a new bicycle plan being developed now that would increase the goal to 1,200 miles of protected lanes, neighborhood bikeways, and shared use paths. At the current pace of construction, those 10 to 15 miles per year of bike lanes, this could take decades to build out. The tofu migas is cooking up at Bolden Creek Cafe in South Austin. That's where political reporter Jack Craver is writing his Austin Politics newsletter. Craver says the city talks a big game about getting people out of single-occupancy vehicles, but he says Austin's not doing nearly enough to allow other types of transportation to compete with cars.
There's this tendency to think that, well, everybody drives here just because of the culture or it's Texas. It's just so much easier. But it's easier because all of our infrastructure focus has gone into making it as easy as possible to drive. And nobody has the guts to say, all right, we're going to take away some of that space from cars and dedicate it to something else.
But Craver says this could change because of shifts in city politics, new council members, new city management, and a transformation of Austin's bureaucracy, the merger of the Transportation and Public Works Department into a single entity.
The key is for the public to keep pressuring city council to pressure city management.
Bike to Work Day started in the 1950s as a way to promote the health benefits of cycling, but it is also a way for people to feel a bit more safe about doing it. If you go out this morning, you might find a new cycling buddy, or at least get a breakfast taco along the way. I'm Nathan Bernier in Austin.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas CASA, where court-appointed volunteers speak up for a child's best interests during their time in foster care. More at becomeacasa.org.
In the Texas newsroom, I'm Joseph Leahy. The Texas Workforce Commission reports today the state gained 33,000 jobs in April, extending its streak in employment growth to 26 months. The Texas jobless rate held steady last month at 4%, which remains above the nation as a whole at 3.4%. Governor Greg Abbott has signed legislation that makes tampering with an ankle monitor a felony. KERA's Tolawani Osabamawo reports the new law stems from the murder of 2 healthcare workers at Methodist Dallas Hospital last year.
Police say Nestor Hernandez shot and killed Jacqueline Pokwa and Katie Flowers while visiting his girlfriend in the hospital. State officials confirmed Hernandez was out on parole with an ankle monitor, but he had permission to be there. State Representative Rafael Anchia of Dallas sponsored Senate Bill 1004 in the House.
You are making a promise to society that you're going to abide by the terms of that supervision, and tampering with or cutting off your ankle monitor is a pretty significant breach.
Before the alleged shooting, Hernandez was accused of 6 different ankle monitor violations. I'm Toluwani Osibamawo in Dallas.
Texas is now busing unauthorized migrants picked up at the southern border to Denver. The first busload arrived there Thursday, according to the governor's office. Texas has so far bused more than 19,000 migrants out of state to cities including New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia. A new poll ranks gun violence as the number 1 threat to American public health. Texas Public Radio's Marian Navarro has details.
The Axios Ipsos American Health Index found 26% of respondents say gun and firearm access is their top concern. This narrowly surpasses concerns over the opioid crisis, as well as obesity and cancer. The number citing gun violence is nearly a 10% increase compared to the last poll in February. The rise comes amid recent mass shootings, including the Allen Mall and Cleveland shootings in Texas. The poll surveyed over 1,000 adults 18 or older in May. The margin of error sits at 3.1 percentage points. I'm Mariana Navarro in San Antonio.
Texas is now home to 4 of the nation's 10 largest cities, according to the latest population estimates from the U.S. Census Bureau. That's after Austin jumped from 11th to 10th in the ranking. That still includes Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. The head count taken in the year up to last July shows Georgetown, north of Austin, had the nation's fastest growth rate at nearly 15%. The Austin suburbs of Kyle and Leander, as well as Little Elm near Frisco, were also among the U.S.'s top 5 fastest growing cities. I'm Joseph Leahy for the Texas Standard.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, providing same-day results and custom treatment plans to tackle allergies at the root of the problem. Over 40 locations throughout Texas. More info at aspireallergy.com.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. Those cheers and honking horns erupted in San Antonio Tuesday night, that short snippet captured by KSAT 12 News. The scene was reminiscent of the several occasions when a certain NBA franchise brought home championships to the Alamo City. But these celebrations were for another feat by that franchise, and one that might be chalked up partly to luck. Tuesday night was when the San Antonio Spurs won the number 1 pick in the upcoming NBA draft, giving the team the chance to draft 19-year-old French phenom Victor Wembanyama. Why all this excitement over a single draft pick? Joining us now, Madeline Mendoza, who covers all things San Antonio for Axios. Madeline, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you so much for having me.
First off, for those listeners who might not be aware of how the NBA draft lottery process works and why this is such a big deal for the Spurs, can you explain how the Spurs came about getting the top draft pick? And I understand that their chances of getting it were the same percentage as a couple of other teams, including Houston, right?
Yes. So because we were one of the top, or actually, I should reword that, we were the last 3 teams between Houston Rockets, the Pistons, and the Spurs. And each of the teams had a 14% chance of getting the number 1 pick. But that didn't mean that any of the other 14 teams towards the bottom had that chance. So it was, as you can expect, it was pretty tense and nerves were shot, including my own, as the season came to an end, I think in April, the Rockets and the Spurs had to have a tiebreaker to see who would be, I think, the second. But
who could lose the hardest is what it sounds like. Yeah,
yes,
right.
Exactly. And the Rockets ended up winning, which still meant that the Spurs had the equal amount of chance. They just couldn't pick lower than 7, and the Rockets couldn't pick lower than 6.
Okay.
So a lot of technicalities, a lot of nerves, all of this surrounding this big night on Tuesday.
And it comes down to the little bouncing balls in the lotto machine, I guess. All
Those
right.
ping pong balls, yeah.
There we go. Okay, so, well, as I mentioned, the Spurs are largely expected to draft Victor Wembanyama from France. Why is there so much excitement over this one draft pick?
Yeah, so he's a generational talent. It seems like he is a Swiss Army knife of a basketball player. People are comparing him to LeBron James. And then you think about the impact LeBron James had on Cleveland and the Cavaliers, not even as a team, but as a city. But for the Spurs, I mean, I think we can all agree these past few years have been a little bit off as a Spurs fan. You know, I grew up in the era of Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker.
Yeah.
When in 97, I was 4 years old. So all we kind of know is winning. So having him kind of brings back that feeling of the late 90s and the 2000s. It feels a lot like childhood for a lot of fans who are now in their 30s and have this buying power and are excited to buy season tickets and are excited to buy jerseys. Obviously, we don't even know if, we were hoping that he is who we draft, but we don't know the number yet. People are just that excited.
It seems like there could be a bit of a danger, too. because you put all your eggs in one prospect's basket here. We've seen in the past there have been very much hyped number one picks, Zion Williamson and Ben Simmons. Is there a danger there that even if all goes as planned, things won't go as planned once the games begin?
Yeah, I have seen some of that conversation floating around Spurs Twitter. People trying to have kind of realistic expectations. You know, there's going to take maybe a few seasons for him to jive with the system and get to know, Pop's coaching skills. But
you're talking about Greg Popovich, the longtime coach there for the Spurs.
Yes. Yeah. But I have also seen people kind of flashing back to when the Spurs did draft David Robinson and Tim Duncan, and how their first seasons were, I think, one of the best seasons for rookies throughout the NBA. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. People are trying to be optimistic and excited and riding the wave, but also, considering that he is a teen, he's 19 years old, he's coming to San Antonio, it's his first time in the NBA. So a little of both mixed feelings.
Do you have a favorite fan reaction so far? What could you say something a bit more about how Spurs fans are feeling right now?
Oh, I think it's a tough one, but I will say the honking downtown, hearing that noise again, that beautiful melody of San Antonio, that has to be one of the top ones. And also, I don't know if you all or anybody listening saw the Rue Pub, their reaction. It made it all over Sports Center, ESPN. The Rue Pub offered to pay tabs that were open before the announcement if the Spurs got the number one pick. And so the cheering from that night, just a combination of getting the pick and having free drinks, the reaction was great.
Yeah, I think some folks on the south side of Boston could probably hear you all the way up here.
Probably.
Well, Madeline, thanks again for joining us, and congratulations to San Antonio, and we'll be watching.
Yes, thank you so much.
Madeline Mendoza writes for Axios. We'll have a link to her latest at texasstandard.org.
Support for Texas Standard comes from BarbaQuest, an original series by the beef-loving Texans at the Texas Beef Council. Texans can stream BarbaQuest episodes and find recipes at beeflovingtexans.com.
The Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast is with you to talk through what you're watching, listening to, and reading. What you need to check out this weekend, what you can skip next, it's all fair game. For pop culture in high spirits, listen to the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Coming-of-age stories have often spoken to audiences universally. It's that awkward stage in life that San Antonio author Shea Serrano has helped bring to streaming screens everywhere with a new show called Primo, a series inspired by his own youth. The show centers around high schooler Rafa and his large family comprised of his mom and her 5 brothers. Joining us now is the actor who plays Rafa's mom, the matriarch of the show, Drea, Christina Vidal. Christina, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I think most people will recognize you from a few iconic works you've been involved with. I mean, you go back to Michael J. Fox. You were starring opposite him in Life with Mikey. Then Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan, that Nickelodeon show where you were Taina. Tell us a little bit about what got you into acting in the first place and how you landed here on Primo.
Well, if you ask my mom, ever since I was little, I was singing and dancing and in talent shows and just always performing. And my oldest sister, Lisa Vidal, who's also an actress, she began first, and I just wanted to follow in her footsteps. I said, I want to do that first time I saw her on TV. And so then never pursued it because I was only like 10 years old, but I always knew I wanted it. And then Life with Mikey started holding cattle call auditions. Yeah. And that was my first opportunity.
Wow. That's, success right out of the gate, it sounds like. I mean, that's something else.
Yeah. It was almost like God was like, I guess you're supposed to do this.
Well, it sounds like you're on to another winner here. I was taking a look at some of the reviews. Hollywood Reporter says, Shea Serrano's family comedy, another low-key winner for Freevee. That's Amazon's free service. Rolling Stone, Primo is a feel-good coming-of-age comedy for the whole family. You're getting some really positive reaction to this. Did you know what you were getting into? I mean, did you know that did this have the feel of a winner to you?
It absolutely did. To be honest, from the moment I read it, I thought, okay, whatever needs to be worked out, I need to do this. Like, this is a good one.
What drew you to the part in the first place?
Well, I loved the writing. I really loved the writing. The breakdown of the character gave a little bit of insight, but really what drew me was when I actually got to read the script and the writing and the relationships. And I just thought, man, I know this woman and I want to play her.
Well, this is a complicated place that Drea is in, right? I mean, when you normally think about the sitcom mom, that mom character usually only has the nuclear family to bounce off of, the husband, the kids. But here you have 5 adult brothers to interact with, as well as Rafa and his friends. And there's a really playful side to your character. Tell us about tapping into that goofiness. Does that sort of sound like your family growing up or not so much?
Well, what's interesting is Drea's strength and the fact that she's a little bit scary and she's a hustler and she's resourceful and all of that those are actually traits of the women in my family. But I never felt I had those traits. But the goofy, playful, childlike side of Drea that's just a little irresponsible and kind of, off color, that's me. So I was really excited when they encouraged kind of giving her that layer and that color. And I remember having a conversation with Lisa Muse-Bryant, who's one of the producers and writers of the show. And she said, we want to make sure that she's not always just the stern sort of law enforcer in the family, but that sometimes we get to see that she really is just one of the siblings. And she gets in with the trouble sometimes as well.
Well, so I understand you recently walked the red carpet there, the opening premiere. What was that like?
Yes. Just so exciting. I mean, just to be able to get to this point. Few people know, of course, the personal journey, but then also just for all of us and for Shay from the very beginning of this idea and this sort of baby, and to see it really come to pass and see that not only did it happen, did they do it, but successfully, we all did it, was just such a payoff. And I got to be with everybody again. I was really sad the writers and Shay couldn't be there. That was really upsetting, but I understand. But it was great to get together with everyone again and because we really were like a family from day one.
You were referring to the writers' strike, of course, ongoing.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the writers' strike.
What's the vibe right now in your part of the country? What with the writers all on strike?
I mean, still striking, still standing in support of, and just hoping and believing that they will work something out because, obviously what's being asked for is more than fair. And we support our writers because they are the driving force of the show.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what viewers should expect when they tune in. Could you say a little bit about that?
Expect to be comforted. Expect to laugh. Expect to be surprised by a few colors and layers of the characters that you wouldn't expect. And I would say expect to fall in love with this family. I mean, by the end of me watching the show, I loved the family like I was a viewer.
I think this is really going to resonate here in Texas. I mean, we're talking about a San Antonio teenager balancing college aspirations and expectations that society might have on him, I think it's probably safe to say. And then there's that hectic home life where you have a big family. And a lot of people, I think, will relate to that sort of experience, don't you think? Oh,
absolutely. I would say, especially the generation we're in now of kids who are Rafa's age, where they have access to so much more information. They're so much further ahead than we are intellectually. They're so bright. They're forward thinkers. And it can be difficult trying to embrace that and pursue that in a family dynamic where there's a lot of old generation thinking, but there's a lot of love. And I think that's what the show ultimately shows. Rolly's character says to Rafa, hey, you got 6 people who give a damn about what happens to you. That must suck. At least there are people who care what you do enough to have an opinion, even if it's the wrong one.
Being from an Hispanic background, what does that? What is your take on how much of a part that plays in telling this story of this family?
I think it's more of a color and a backdrop, and not really the central focus of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is important about that aspect is that this is telling the story of a Hispanic family, but it's more telling it in a way that says, hey, we're a family. We're people. We have these different needs, these different things, these different personalities that anyone could relate to, and we just so happen to be Hispanic, which I think is important to begin to see Hispanic people and other cultures and everything just normalized as we are in real life. We're doing the same things everyone else is doing. We're trying to navigate family life and work and relationships and all of that.
Christina, congratulations on the success here. This is just wonderful and getting so many great reviews, and I can't wait to stream it myself.
Thank you.
Christina Vidal plays Drea on the new show Primo, which is streaming on Amazon Freevee. Congratulations again, Christina, and thanks so much for joining us on the Texas Standard.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas College Savings Plan, administered by the state of Texas. Families can save for tuition, room and board, books, and other qualified education expenses at eligible schools nationwide. Learn more at texascollegesavings.com.
The Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast is with you to talk through what you're watching, listening to, and reading. What you need to check out this weekend, what you can skip next, it's all fair game. For pop culture in high spirits, listen to the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
You're listening to the Texas Standard. I'm Bianca Elisa Perez with Typewriter Rodeo. We write poems on the spot. Perez women have always been beautiful in their act of taking apart something to make a new thing, a shedding my skin feasts on. I see my face in the tearing of a soft tortilla. It's all about amor here. Roll the tortilla up con amor. Drown the tortilla in oil con amor. Flip it over con amor. Today my flautas do not burn. Today I'm reminded that I am my grandmother's flesh. Hot oil pops onto my thumb and I don't wince. This is the way to loving my body, to breathing the burns on my fingers, my wrists, my palms. Each burn a time I cooked a meal for myself, sat down at the dinner table with myself, passed the salt to myself, blessed my food the same way my grandmother did. This is Bianca Lisa Perez with the Typewriter Rodeo, and you are listening to the Texas Standard.
We want to hear your ideas for Typewriter Rodeo poems. Send them to us on social media or over at texasstandard.org. Time now for the week that was in Texas politics. Joining us, James Barragan, political reporter for the Texas Tribune. James, welcome back.
Hey, David. Good to be with you.
First full week without Title 42 at the border. A lot of attention focused on the reduction in the numbers of people crossing the border. But a sad story. An 8-year-old girl has died in federal custody at a border station in Harlingen. What's known so far about what actually happened?
Well, yeah, a very tragic story, and very little is actually known about what happened. We know that she was in a Harlingen station. She was in custody of Customs and Border Protection, and that's pretty much all we know. She died while in federal custody. They tried to take her to a hospital, but she was pronounced dead at the hospital. And there is going to be an investigation by the Office of Professional Responsibility, and we will learn more details. But right now, very little is known about the details surrounding her death.
Yeah, at the top of today's broadcast, I mentioned how border security has become a big thing right now in the Texas Ledge, what with just 9 days left in the 88th session, at least the official time of the session. Several key bills, not clear where they are. School vouchers, for instance. Governor Greg Abbott said he'd call a special session if that doesn't get passed. What are you hearing?
Yeah, and it looks like the bill is on life support. You know, its chances look very bleak. The House and the Senate are very, very far apart. The Senate bill, where the idea sort of originated, would have covered 5.5 million school children in Texas. The House version, where there's been some resistance to it, would only cover about 800,000 kids. It's for kids who need special education or who have gone to a school that has gotten a failing grade on standards. And so they're very far apart. The House version is very limited. And, you know, the governor said, this doesn't do it for me. And if we don't revert back or closer to what the Senate version is, I will call a special session. So we're on the lookout for that.
Seems like there's a lot of tension right now between the House and Senate. House appears to have weakened some of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's top priorities. Am I right, or is that just a perception here?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you look at the school voucher bill, that's definitely one example. You know, it goes from like covering all school children to like a very limited amount. Another instance of that is the higher education bills on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and on tenure. The House basically codified the tenure procedures and protocols that are in place already right now. They're trying to codify that into law, which wouldn't get rid of tenure. It would just make it a little bit more difficult. But the Senate wanted to get rid of it completely. There are other social issues like the drag show bans that seem to be watered down in the House compared to what they were in the Senate. And that's part of this late session, you know, horse trading and strategizing. So I suppose I really expect to see more of that, and we'll see whether they can come to a compromise.
We're going to have a lot to talk about next Friday, James. So let's fasten our seatbelts here. You can check out more on these stories over at TexasTribune.org. That's where James Barragan covers politics. James, thanks so much for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Almost the weekend. Shelley Brisbane in for Wells Dunbar, monitoring the talk of Texas online. Shelley, welcome back.
Hey there, David, and happy Friday to you. A little breaking news from earlier this morning. The Texas Tribune's Eleanor Klipanoff is reporting that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has opened a second investigation into a hospital providing transition-related care for minors. This time it's Texas Children's. The Texas Ledge passed a bill barring minors from receiving this care, but it's not yet signed or in effect. Remember, David, that we reported earlier in the week about a similar investigation at Dell Children's Hospital here in Austin and some staff departing that facility after that investigation began.
Yes, I recall the adolescent medication or medical clinic, I believe, there.
Exactly.
And it's getting a lot of push from some top GOP politicians. I believe Ted Cruz calling for an investigation. All of this happening right now. And now you say Texas Children's in the Attorney General's crosshairs?
Yeah, looks that way. And the Texas Tribune says they have a story working, and I'm sure we'll be covering that going forward on Texas Standard, too.
What else?
David, also, we heard earlier today about Bike to Work Day. I don't know if you've ever biked to work, but this is the day when folks...
Motorbikes, but I think that's about it. I don't think that counts in this context.
Two wheels, but not quite the same. A lot of people concerned about the safety issues, but a lot of people enjoy it. They see the health benefits and the ability to get out of their cars and use two wheels instead of four if they want to. So I wanted to know from our listeners what their take on Bike to Work Day was, and got a couple of responses. On Twitter, a user named Scorter-in-Chief writes, used to manage the bike shop of Richardson back in 2013, not RBM, and road cycling was like Mad Max. Had to stick to bike trails or giant packs to stay safe.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I mean, you know, you have the cars and trucks that come in, and it's tough if you're out there on a bike.
It really depends on what infrastructure is out there and whether the car and truck drivers are being as cognitive as they should be if that they're bikers out there. John D on Twitter also says, I would love to be able to bike to work, but it's not feasible for what I do, construction. And I know how people drive in my city around bicycles. And so sometimes the job is also the thing that keeps you from biking if you'd like to.
Yeah, for sure. Shelley Brisbane monitoring the talk of Texas, and she'll continue to be taking your comments at Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Kristen Cabrera, Alexandra Hart, Michael Marks, Gloria Martinez, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli is our director. Casey Cheeks, our technical director. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Support for Texas Standard comes from TCU, where Horned Frogs strive for the greater good, like alumna Catherine Beatty, a producer, writer, and disability advocate in the entertainment industry. More at 150stories.tcu.edu. Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.
You've been listening to the Texas Standard. Texas Standard and KUT Public Radio are members of the NPR network. It's an independent coalition of public media podcasters. You can find a lot more great content and shows like the Texas Standard in the NPR network, available wherever you listen to podcasts.